just to introduce yourselves, your name, your organization, and your organization's role in your community. And it looks like Chelsea, you are first on this list, so if you wouldn't mind getting us started, that would be great.
Oh, wow. This must be in by first name alphabetical order, because I'm a T, so I'm always last. And I was like, whew, alphabetical order, I'll just hang out for a sec. But anyway, yeah, really glad to be here. I'm really a fan of all the programming you guys do and of TomTom. I'm actually based in Washington, D.C., but I'm the programming director of the Ocean City Film Festival, which is in Ocean City, Maryland. And if you're wondering how Ocean City and DC, I grew up in Ocean City. I'm like one of the few people who lived here year-round for 18 years. I left Ocean City, went to DC, and I've been in DC for the past 10 years. And Ocean City was really lacking in a lot of cultural and arts programming. So we're the first film festival in the immediate Ocean City resort area. I'm really excited to hear about your organizations, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Hey, I'm Chandler Farabee. I'm the program manager for the Virginia Film Festival. We're in Charlottesville, and we do year-round programming, and then typically a 5-day festival in October, but kind of weighing our options this year for sure.
Okay, it looks like me, even though I think there are others who are alphabetically before me.
Well, if we're going by first name, I guess that would be me.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm Dwan Reese. My title's listed Curator of Music and Performing Arts, but I was recently promoted to Associate Director for Curatorial Affairs at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. We're a museum, so we do exhibits, programming, publications, you name it, we do it. We've been open for about 4 years now. We're the newest museum at the Smithsonian, but our core mission is telling the American story through the lens of the African American experience.
Okay, I think I'm next. I think I know my alphabet. I'm Evany Lumumba. I am by profession a literature professor, so I'm an associate professor and department chair at Tougaloo College for the Department of English and Modern Languages, but I also have the unique opportunity of serving on several arts organizations boards. So the International Ballet Competition, Mississippi Museum of Art Community Advisory Board, as well as the Mississippi Book Festival and New Stage Theater, which is one of our community theaters here in Jackson, Mississippi. So for the past several weeks, I've been in sort of an advisory and support role to several organizations in trying to figure out how to orchestrate this pivot to best serve our community, and also still linking the students that I serve to all of these organizations and increasing access for the community and the students I serve. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
I think that jumps to me. I'm Emily Smith, and I'm the executive director of 1708 Gallery. We're a nonprofit contemporary art space in Richmond. I'm a Charlottesville native, so love TomTom. We are a 41-year-old organization. We've been in the community for now, the life of the arts community in Richmond, really. And our focus is giving support to emerging artists, primarily in a presenting capacity. And so we've definitely had to pivot. Our whole programming is around our space. And so I'm interested to hear how folks have managed that. We've dealt with it in a couple of ways, including virtually. And so I'm definitely interested in this conversation, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think next is me. I'm Patty. So Rabbit is a startup we registered last year, and we are originated from UVA. So I'm also actually recently graduated student from Darden School of Business this last week. And so what we are doing is we have a platform to connecting artists, especially emerging artists, with the brands and to use their IP licensing and explore new markets. So we also pivoting our business now, move more things, use technology, move more things like online, and it can be very interesting to communicate with all of you. Thanks.
I think I'm the last one. So I'm Jim Walker with Big Car Collaborative. We are sort of an umbrella organization that has a lot of different programs within us. So we have a space that's called the Tube Factory that's in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's a community center and an art museum both. And then we also do work in public spaces, and we have a radio station that broadcasts across the city here. So we're doing a lot of programming that has moved out into public spaces, and we're also connecting with people through the radio station. If you're familiar with the bridge in Charlottesville, the people in Charlottesville, Alan Gafinsky worked at Big Car before he came to Charlottesville. And we're playing some of the haikus that people are making in Charlottesville and elsewhere over the radio station. And one last thing about our work is that we partner with the University of Indianapolis on a placemaking and social practice art program, which I helped start. So we work with grad students through that program at our place too.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Janelle, I think I can handle your introduction and kind of tee you up for your presentation. Janelle is a music therapist and also has a certificate in equity-based monitoring and evaluation from Eval Partners. One of those partners is UNICEF. So she's worked domestically and internationally in that field since 2014. Bringing her on today specifically because she's worked with the Armed Services Arts Partnership, who I mentioned before. They're DC-based. They provide community building, exercise, and growth opportunity for veterans and families of the military. So she's designed over the past year and a half a program impact evaluation that has now changed dramatically over the past couple months, and I think done some amazing things with their M&E and general impact tracking over the past weeks. So I'll let her share a little bit about that now.
Great, thank you. And thanks for letting me pop into your meeting today. I appreciate it. What I didn't share, and it didn't occur to me until I was listening to everybody talk about your introduction. So I'm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm actually I'm a musician by training, and I'm actually part of an international collective called Arts Dialogue. And so it's community artists, musicians, and dancers from around the world, specifically engaged in peace building. So I work with musicians and artists in Afghanistan and Sri Lanka, in parts of Colombia, in Northern Ireland, in parts of the UK, and then here in the United States as well. And I have an orchestra that I run for youth here in Philadelphia called Orchestral Dialogues, Musicking Together. Using music as a way to do identity development for youth, specifically around race relations. And that is the goal of that organization. So just so you know that I do the impact evaluation, and I have the experience of doing the programming as well. So I was asked here today to just kind of share a little bit about the work that I'm doing with the Armed Services Arts Partnership. I started working with them in 2017, and I did a 1.5 year mixed methods program impact evaluation that we are actually getting ready to submit a public report about, and we'll be submitting to different journals for academic publication. We were in partnership with Western Carolina University, so it did go through an IRB approval. And it was specifically looking at the impact of participating in the community arts of comedy, boot camp, Operation Improvisation, storytelling, and creative writing classes on veteran well-being. And so we looked at that from veteran self-report, staff report, so talking with the teaching artists, the family members, the caregivers, and A.S.A.P is set up to do performances with audiences. And so I actually had the opportunity to go to DC and also Hampton Roads, which are the two locations. And I was able to interview audience members about their experience as well. So it was all in person, and then they took that and we moved it into and we created an internal monitoring and evaluation system that's been in operation just about a year now. And then COVID-19 hit. And so Brian, who's the new executive director, contacted me and said, hey, we are switching platforms. We need to move everything online, and we need to rethink the work that we're doing in terms of watching our impact. And so in probably about 1 month's time, we switched everything to accommodate all of the different avenues that they are now using that they weren't before, in terms of all these virtual touch points. So they have weekly performances, they have online classes, they have online workshops, they have online coffee hours. And so there's all these things, and on average, they're reaching, I think, just about 200 or 300 people a week, maybe. And that includes audience members. And so we wanted to really then hone down around the impact of COVID-19. So trying to suss out why people are participating in the programming, what and the impact it's having. We really, with A.S.A.P, we're looking specifically at well-being and flourishing literature. So really focusing on, for this point, like mood and self-esteem and social connectedness. So we really honed down to just 3 main areas. And then we rebuilt the entire M&E system in a matter of weeks to capture that data for everybody who's coming through it. So I have a small couple of slides that I'll share with you. And then, oh, sorry, then I'm unable to share my screen.
Cool, let me work to change that quickly. I just made you a co-host. Does that help your abilities?
It does, thank you. So I think it's really important that as we're switching into these times, and from an international psychology perspective, I will say that in the psych world, we're talking very much about the psychological impact and the uptick in isolation, depression, and suicide that we're tracking in the field. So this is a really great time for, I think, community arts and creative arts therapists to work together to say, you know, how do we begin to track our impact on these areas that the psych world is concerned about. So again, for an internal monitoring and evaluation system, we really switched over to measuring the impact of participation in these classes. Or we were initially just, and we were looking at a number of things, but it's like top 4 for us were social connectedness, self-esteem, humor styles, and arts engagement. And then the pivot that we made with COVID-19 was really just looking at isolation, belonging, and well-being, and specifically improving mood. And so we're tracking through polls and then through post surveys at the end of all of their points of contact and engagement, people self-reporting back about isolation, belonging, and mood. And then the other piece that we're also doing is just basic feedback around, you know, was this accessible? How accessible was it? And what was the ease of using the online platform for delivery of the content? So as you're thinking about things that you're doing, some lessons that we've learned, you know, some basic tips for evaluating what you're doing, and it doesn't have to be as formal as what A.S.A.P is doing, but, you know, going back and looking at what are your goals and your outcomes for your programming. How are you currently measuring that? What adaptations do you might need to make right now? I will say the main concern that I have as an evaluator is survey fatigue. And so you really shouldn't have like 5 to 10 questions maximum, and 10 is kind of pushing it. So I would say like maybe 5 to 8. And just know that most online platforms allow you to embed the survey directly into it. So like whatever platform you're using, your point of engagement ends, and then you should be able to automatically kick somebody into a survey at the end to get some feedback. You want to make sure that your questions are clear and focused. So you don't want to ask 3 different things in one question. So if you want to know their experience about participating, you know, what type of experience are you trying to understand? So just making sure you really kind of get down into the details for yourself. And if you use a Likert scale, like those are the scales that you'll see, like not at all to completely at all, or to completely, you know, making sure that it's a 3, a 5, or a 7-point scale on, that's pretty standard. So those are things that I just wanted to share. And then, you know, I'm happy to speak further with anybody beyond this meeting. And so you can go to I have the name of my organization is called the Junkin Group. So you can go to our website, and you can also reach me by email at any point. So just wanted to share that. And again, thank you for letting me be a part of your conversation today. I'm happy to be here.
Great, thanks Janelle, and welcome Anjali as well to the call. If you'd like to just say a few things about your job and your organization, Anjali, to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry I was late. Had yet another Zoom. So my name is Anjali Moon. I'm the founder and creative director of the Africana Independent Film Festival based in Richmond, Virginia. We've been around for about 7 years, but we celebrate the 5th year anniversary of our multi-day this September. And we are in the process of figuring out how we're going to present a film festival in the middle of all of this. But we're excited, have some ideas, so we look forward to the challenge. I'm also the assistant curator of film and special programs at the Institute for Contemporary Art here in Richmond. And I do a couple other things, but those are my primary focuses, and I'm a mommy. And that's about it. So nice to see you guys.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'd love to just kind of open the floor now for anyone who'd like to share thoughts or has questions for each other. I know there's a few film festival operators and a few museum folks, so there are synergies there. I think really what we want to try and hash out today is, you know, how to sustain appetite for virtual events and virtual surveys or ways of tracking impact, as Janelle was talking about, and how to sort of advocate for the impact of the arts in this moment. So I'd also remind you that we are recording, so if there's anything you are burning to share with the world, we'd be happy to hear those thoughts. Thanks.
And if there's anything you don't want to share with the world, but you want to share with this group, you can just say off the record and we'll take it out.
Hands up. Do we do hands? I'm an educator, so that's kind of what I pivot to. I just want to say, you know, in terms of having to pivot at this time, what COVID-19 has done in a number of realms is demonstrate a variety of inequities. And so I think while we talk a lot about public health during this time and healthcare inequities, that also I think we should consider the arts community. I was on a call yesterday with one of our community theaters, and some folks on the call were just realizing that not everyone has access to community theater or to be able to purchase season tickets or a ticket to one show. And so this really is an opportunity, I believe, for every industry, including our arts communities, to increase access to what it is that we produce, because we know that it's beneficial and impacted by every community. No one should be isolated from artistic manifestations and productions. And so my hope is that as that happens, folks will begin to see the necessity of our art communities. We've gotten to share some CARES grants through one of the boards that I serve on with a lot of museums, a lot of art spaces. And what I look for in a lot of those applications is how they intend on increasing their accessibility to the communities where they're housed. So I hope that this moment is not overlooked as this sort of arduous thing that we're doing just to get through, and then we go back to business as usual, but we start to incorporate more voices and more communities in what we're producing and what we're doing.
I just want to say I agree. Oh no, please go ahead.
I agree. I mean, I think part of this is making things more widely accessible, and that is showing the importance of doing so, and not just doing as an add-on, that it really needs to be included in the fabric of your daily work. The same, but to that, to counter that, we've also had discussions about people who don't have digital access, whether they're, they don't have internet connections, or they're older, or maybe some younger individuals who don't do Zoom or don't do all these things. And so much of our audience, it's a unique dilemma, is that part of the experience of the museum is being in that space, and no virtual platform or engagement is going to capture it. It's a pilgrimage. It's the space is part of the narrative that we tell. And so, I'm sitting here kind of lamenting some of the things we're lost, because I think what all of our organizations do, and what it's, and I'd love to hear more about how to measure impact with something like that, because it's more qualitative than quantitative. But, what I see, what I worry about the impact of the quarantine is just, community connections, the spirit of the arts, that the way that we engage ourselves. It's kind of those unspoken things that are taken for granted that organizations like ours offer people. While we're focused on healthcare, education, and businesses, those are all important issues. But what I see at jeopardy are the real ways of connecting, being face-to-face, touching people. I sing. We probably can't sing in a choir until there's a vaccine. And those are very powerful things that sustain us in all ways. And, maybe I'm focusing on the negative. I can't see that loss is tremendous. And I think we're going to see, if we're not seeing already, the impact of that. How, whether it's mood or attitude, temperament, when people don't have the things in their lives that connect them to other people, and participatory, there's an absence there, and there's a void that's going to be filled in other ways.
I agree with that, but I'll also add that I've seen community come together in a really tremendous way during this, right? There have been really creative ways that people have decided to help each other in ways that they weren't doing before this. They've become more creative than they were before all of this happened. They've figured out how to utilize technology in ways that have allowed us to keep some, semblance of connectivity. And I think that if organizations and institutions can be creative enough to find ways to connect with people right now and help them ride that wave into like post-COVID reality, people are so starving for what you're saying that I think they're going to rush to the places that have intentionally created space, that create it now and hold on to that energy all the way until it reopens, until places can reopen. So I think people want it. And because they want it so bad, people talk about pent up demand. There is no greater demand, way more than wanting your burger or your beer. You really want a hug, or you want to see your friend like in real time. And so I think that if people will continue to be creative in the use of technology and the use of each other, right? I'm saying, like, I'm not 100% sure where you are, but in Richmond, like, the creative community has been doing some really amazing things, like, to the point it's mind blowing, and I applaud it. And I think that if we can just really hold on tight to that and carry it with us all the way through this, we're going to see a stronger and tighter community potentially, because we'll have a greater appreciation for each other. Now, I can be a little Pollyanna, so that might be that, but I think it can happen.
Oh, it's good to have Pollyannas, and I'm not countering. Well, I know it shows us that we're trying to provide content through our website, resources, programs, video, but I do think technology is far past what we've been able to employ. There are really interesting interactive things that we could do that we're not quite set up to do. And part of our mission, the Secretary of the Smithsonian is really extending our digital outreach, but it's more than just reach. It's also creating enriching experiences that are just, well, I don't know if anything replaces being in person, but that are interactive and actually capitalizes on what being in the virtual world might allow us to do that we couldn't do on an exhibit floor or in an auditorium. But we're behind the curve on that.
And I don't want to hog things, but I just want to say, at the ICA, for like the first kind of leg of this thing, we didn't really have anything that we were producing. But now we have some stuff that we're beginning to roll out. And I think that the reality of this is going to stick with us much longer than people really want to admit. And I think that gives us all time to find our own way and to produce things that can be fresh and new. Because at some point, people will get sick of checking this one website because they've been doing it since March, right? Who has something fresh in July? And maybe that's what your institution is bringing to the table. So I hear what you're saying about being behind the curve because I feel you. But at the same time, I think it'll be a new curve and you might just be at the front of that, Where are you from?
I'm in DC. I'm at the Smithsonian.
Okay.
And trying to work through a large bureaucracy, it's hard to get ahead sometimes. But there's a lot of stuff going on. But I think now we need to put that energy there as well as kind of maintain the other things we do.
Gotcha.
So actually, I really agree. A great discussion about that, and because we are thinking about this like new curves and new initiatives a lot because we're a startup, and so actually I kind of observe like how people what they're doing now. I mean, they have plenty of time. Many people spend a lot on Netflix, listen to their Spotify, play the puzzle games. They just need some entertainment and they want to engage people. Many people feel very boring and depressed. So my team have like some crazy ideas. We're still kind of exploring them. And I like to hear you guys' opinion. Like one idea we have is, so we notice one thing, like when people feel depressed, I mean, they kind of lose the excitement and also their excitement actually to explore like by themselves. That's why they rely on like Netflix, the algorithm, and also, that's pushing them, okay, that's the movie you like. So I think that's why, because I'm a super museum like lover, I go to museum, I see like the archives that I will drive to another city to see them, but now I can't do that. And I feel like I'm not that willing to explore the website. It's like, and pick the thing I like. It's kind of very consuming, especially during this time, because my friends, like we talk about this a lot, and people need to handle a lot of other things like health issue, family issue, and jobs, a lot of things. They want something very simple and to have them distracted, feel like that they're connected. And I believe their art and creativity actually can help them, but it should be easier. It should like request fewer energy from the people, and also another idea we're thinking about is many people, the gaming company really doing very great recently, because basically you can play game together with your friends online. You kind of interact with it. It's fun and it's very, very like relaxing and it's very immersive as well. So I have this idea and said, how about we turn into exhibition into the gaming? It's the same thing. It's a exploration. It's find something new, something interesting, and you tackle the new ideas and explore. It's just something can be very fun. So actually we're pivoting all those like ideas, as I mentioned in my introduction. We are trying to be more like use technology actually do that. So I'm also very eager to hear what do you guys think about this, all those initiatives? What do you guys think when you do the virtual things? What things do you think is missing? What aspects we can help with the technology side? And yeah, that's kind of my recent thoughts.
Yeah, this is Chelsea from the Ocean City Film Festival again, and I will just fully disclose that I'm on my phone, so I can't see all of you at one time, and so I'm frantically going like, so sorry if you continually see me swiping with my hands, but yeah, on that point, the Ocean City Film Festival is a relatively young film festival. We've been around for 5 years, but we're attached to a partner organization called the Ocean City Center for the Arts, which houses the Art League of Ocean City, which is like a painters collective that was started by a bunch of retirees who lived in Ocean City in like the 60s and 70s. So our audiences are really diverse in age, and we're basically catering like the lowest common denominator programming. I mean, not in terms of our content, but in terms of how we're presenting it. We're just presenting everything on Facebook right now because we have such a large gap in our ages that we provide content to. And now I'll also say we're very, very lucky and grateful in that our film festival happened this year. Right before everything happened with COVID, our film festival was March 5th to the 7th. So, I mean, it felt like we had the film festival, it was a huge success. And then all of a sudden the world was flipped over. And basically in Ocean City, we also have a lot of racial inequity, a lot of pay inequity because it's a rural area. And what people don't realize is that Ocean City is funded by the tourists who come down from DC and Baltimore. And even if you realize that in a theoretical sense, to see it practically in front of you is something that we are confronted with every day. And right now we're doing all of our programming pretty much for free because we know that's going to help our audiences. It's going to help their mental state. They're going to have like a film to watch on Saturday. They can just go to facebook.com, go to our page and watch it. And that will sort of serve their weekend entertainment. And we're getting like 600 people a night viewing our films on Facebook. And for us as a small film festival, that's unprecedented. We had almost 700 people in person in March to see our feature film. So just to give you a sense of our numbers and how we're tracking that, and Facebook tracks everything for you. We just go on and we can see that we have 600 viewers. And I'm not at all advocating for Facebook as a tool for every organization. It's definitely not it's just not suited for every organization. But we found it to be really useful in terms of tracking our impact.
I'm curious about everybody's numbers. I mean, you know, there are lots of course, you don't have to have huge numbers to have an impact, but that's so interesting, Chelsea, that your numbers are up. Is everyone else, as they pivot to virtual, feeling that, and what has kind of been the up and down trajectory? Because as we like go back to some analog stuff, it feels kind of confounding about what to do and what to prioritize.
Yeah, I am very curious in that too, Rachel. And just to say again, I don't want to paint, you know, an unfair picture, but I truly believe our numbers are up because our festival happened, and then within a week, everyone's lives changed, and they were still thinking about our festival, you know, and that plays a huge role. And again, that's why I said we're really grateful for that, but that's just not the reality for every film festival and every organization. So that, I believe, is why our numbers are up.
I would add, similar to Chelsea in some ways. I mean, I'm not completely comparing numbers one-to-one because of our gallery space, we're dependent upon openings and things like First Fridays that can draw a lot of people. But, and we really didn't have, I mean, other than the like obligatory Instagram and Facebook presence, we really didn't actively use social media in a way, though it was a goal. So there's some silver linings in all of this. But we've been doing once a week studio visits where, you know, that the artists are just talking about what they're working on, and people are commenting and asking questions in the stream, and then we're putting them on IGTV, and we'll have like 500 and 600 views of them over the course of a week. So that's vastly different than the number of people walking in on a Wednesday or a Thursday regular day to the gallery. So in a lot of ways, it's given us a platform that we didn't have. And I also think, going back to the conversation about the types of things that might be available virtually or online, what we've realized, because we've done both, we've done like putting our exhibitions online that are a little less sort of personally engaging, and then these moments with artists, is that people want to see a person talking and moving around their space. And even if they're kind of glitchy and not perfect, they are really accessible, and you have this chance to see a person, you know, there's a human component to that that's been, I think, part of the reason why they've been so popular viewing wise.
I just wanted to say, as you're all talking, there's a couple of things that I was thinking about, and I think just to type back, I think it was Evany who said at first, like this epidemic or the pandemic has brought forth the inequalities and access to the arts. And so like, I'm wondering, as well as maybe part of the reason that you're getting higher numbers is that people who maybe couldn't normally in person access them are able to access them digitally. And so that's something to just kind of be thinking about from an equity position. And then I think too, like, it's this interesting mix, at least from my experience that I've had as a music therapist, and I've been doing workshops and things for different groups globally. And so, you know, having to think through, like, how can I bring people into the creative experience together live? And the, you know, just the digital divide, and not everybody has equal access, and, you know, all of those things. So it is possible to do. And so I would encourage you all to think through, like, how you can make things both interactive as well as accessible, and to really think about, I was thinking, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your name. You were talking from the Smithsonian, but I was thinking about when you said the thing about space, and I thought, well, you know, what would it be like to have maybe a dancer work with you who, like, talked about, like, how do you help create, help teach people how to create the space, like, to actually, if they were to actually pretend like they were moving through the museum with you within their own space, right? And so thinking about that connection of body and movement, and then thinking about, like, maybe bringing in artists who maybe could come in and do things with, like, maybe families or with kids or with adults, and they could create a version of whatever the artifact is. And then I was thinking about, there's these really great orchestras that are based in, I think it's in Venezuela, but it's kids who live in this area that's considered like a dump or a trash heap. And they've literally taken trash and turned the trash into these beautiful instruments that they actually perform on. And it's fantastic if you get a chance to look at it. And so I think one of the things that we want to not forget is the connection to what we have. And it doesn't all have to be in the virtual digital world. And so how can we, who are leading these programmings, begin to think about an asset-based approach? So, like, what are the assets? What are the things that people have? And working with that versus thinking about what are the things that they don't have. And so how can we have both perspectives in on that? And then the final thing that I'll say, and I'll shut up, is that, yes, I should have said this, I'm actually a qualitative researcher by training, and so I very much value speaking and getting, so some very simple questions you might ask is just, what brought you to our programming today? I think that one question is a fantastic, and if that's the only question you ask, there is just a wealth of information that you can get from that. And that's it, that's all I'm gonna say.
I also think that one of the more important things that can be done right now is asking artists that you work with, filmmakers, painters, actors, directors, just asking them what they need. And there's a really great article that was written for Dance Magazine, but it pretty much just encompasses all of the live performing arts, even film. And my background is in theater, so the fact that, you know, I'm working in a film festival is somewhat of an anomaly. Although I'm sure a lot of theater folks work in film festival spaces, it's something that in my practice as an artist, just speaking outside of the organization that I represent, I just wish more people asked me what I needed when all of this started. Because on the one hand, I was on the high of the film festival just happening. And I was like, yeah, great, we did a great festival. And then all of a sudden I was working hours and hours and hours trying to make Facebook and like live streams happen. And I wasn't, you know, collecting unemployment for the work that I was doing in theater and my contracted work and a lot of my independent artist work. And I think it's really just important to ask the artists what they need right now, because we all kind of work in that realm of helping artists and helping advance artists. And we're just not a film festival without the artists. So I think there's a valid conversation to have about tracking impact with your artistic community. And I think a lot of us have also come to this work through our own artistic practice. One thing I wish like could have happened maybe even sooner is this call, right? I mean, I you know, wish, but yeah, I do think that using an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset, as Janelle was alluding to, has been a big part of how we function as an organization, but also how I function as an individual artist. And when you bring those values to your organization, that's sometimes the most important part of this.
What are people hearing or feeling or getting on the connection between impact and funding? Like, what are you hearing from your funders? Like, I feel like, you know, we all care about impact because it's our organization's missions, but it's not tied to funding. And as impact changes and the whole landscape changes, what are y'all getting? So I'm going to touch on that.
I can talk about that for a second. So one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how we're moving our work out into public spaces and how you can do surveys and data collection out in public. So some of the ideas that people have been talking about really fit well with what we're thinking, which is to do some phone surveys and have people be able to just leave messages, so that, because we know that everybody out there may not have a smartphone to fill out a survey on their phone. And you can't do what we normally do, which is just have people with clipboards just talking to people and having them answer, and then we just fill out their answers so they don't even have to write anything. But one of the partners that we're working with is the Parks Department and also our public transit, and neither of them have very good data. So the park doesn't have demographic data or anything to support what could be a potential source of funding to show who's using the park and what's happening in the park. And also the bus service doesn't have very good recent ridership data, and they can't say what's going on with who's using a new bus rapid transit line that we have. So I think what we're trying to work on is using data to support our partners as well as ourselves in terms of funding potential. And I do feel like now, though, that there's a turn away from funding being dependent so much on data results. And I think that's good for all kinds of things in terms of smaller organizations and people who don't have funding for data tracking. But I do feel like philanthropy should be considering funding that so that people can get data. And in our case, we've done that over the years, so we have some experience with that. But some people and some partners, even entities like the Parks Department, they don't have any good data. So then when somebody says, well, we're interested in supporting what you do, but who will be affected by this? And if the Parks can't say like who even uses their park, then that's a drawback for them.
I would just like to share Marlon with North Carolina Arts in Action. We're an educational program, so we are used to bringing our classes to the children in schools. Schools are closed, so we are trying to teach children from their homes, basically. So we have when things are normal, of course, our funding is always tied to what we can demonstrate the impact of the program is, and we have to be able to track that somehow. And we use surveys for that, and we use, you know, a designed research program to measure our impact. But now that we have been teaching online, we haven't gotten to that point. We just think, okay, let's measure our impact on how many children we can get online now, and look at it that way, and have a goal of re-engaging more and more children as the weeks go by. That's really where we stand. So, but it does concern me that demonstrating impact, so you can go to your funders and say, this is what we're doing somehow, either through numbers or through your story, it's going to become even more important now. So that's one of my concerns, how to measure this impact and how to put it in a narrative to make sure our funders say, yeah, that's, you know, that's worth investing in.
I think in my experience, and you know, one of our strategic initiatives right now is to reach 1 billion people. And I sat on a pan-institutional committee, and we were all talking about counting and numbers and all of that. But it's easy to say you've reached X amount of people, but what kind of engagement are we having? And in my experience, there hasn't been a lot of conversation about that. I do think, given where we are right now, I think the conversations are going to change. And as we move into the fall, what funders are interested in or what they see their needs are, I think we may have to reconfigure our messages. But I'm always struck about measuring impact. I've worked for the federal government for 20 years, and before I was at the Smithsonian, I was at NEH. And we always grappled with that. How do you measure the impact of a humanities program? And we all know, but when you have to go to Congress and make your case, the stories do help, but they also look at the numbers. How many people are served in their congressional district, da, 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 while the people on the ground are really creating experiences that have some weight and really change communities. We know that's true. And I think part of the challenge that I think we still have, and you can talk about higher education and making the case for the humanities, is getting that message across and getting people to value it. It's like anything to me, there's this whole world existence that we take for granted. And this is the sphere that we operate in, that if you took all of it away, where would we be as a society? But no one doesn't have that lens to see and understand that. And I see we're still struggling about that conversation and how to get that message through.
Yeah, I would agree. And my hope would be that more and more organizations, especially arts-based organizations, advocate for exactly what you're talking about. Like, there has to be a different way to talk about impact. And it can't always be tied to numbers, and we shouldn't be exploiting people's stories in order to ensure funding. And so, you know, I think, again, I would go back to where, if you have goals and objectives, like saying, like, you know, could, you know, for Mr. Torres, you said, you know, could you do, you know, tell us what you learned today. And like, and that's it, right? And that's your impact. Tell us what you learned about yourself. Tell us what you learned about somebody else. And so switching the narrative, I think, goes into maybe switching the questions that we're asking people to report back. And again, consciously saying, I'm not going to use your narrative to exploit you in order to ensure that I get money. Because that's the unfortunate cycle that I think often happens, which I think goes back into this idea of like the inequity where we started this conversation. And so I would always encourage organizations to think through creatively, like how can you begin to ask the questions that you know, and begin to advocate for funders to say, like, I need you to take a different lens and a new understanding for the impact of what programming can do and is. The other thing I would say is there is arts-based research. It's called ABR, and it's really fantastic. Or you can use arts inquiry, which is another aspect of it. And it's where the act of creating serves as the research itself. And so, I mean, there's a whole methodology and philosophy behind it. I won't get into all of that, but if you're interested, I'll send some resources to Ben, but to share with everybody. But so it's the, like, if you were an arts inquiry, you would do the create whatever that creativity is together, and then you'd show it somehow, and then you would get feedback, okay, from whoever saw it, just to tell them whatever their experience of that, of viewing that or being there or participating in it. And that's the data. And so it becomes less about somebody else coming in and like, there's an analysis that goes with it for sure. I don't want to discount that. But I feel like it's lost. It's not talked about enough, I don't think, in the arts world, in the community arts world especially. I don't think there's even there's often a lack of awareness that this exists, because it's often housed in academia. And so, let's break that and figure out how to take it out of the academia and bring it into the community, because it's I think a really fantastic way. And I think it goes into some of these things that you're actually talking about of how can we show impact without creating all of these additional tools and measures when actually the act of creating is the data collection tool itself.
I think what I found, I'm in an interesting position because I'm an educator in the humanities, and so we are always in danger within academia of having funding cut or having our departments sort of dwarfed. But what keeps us alive, especially as an English department, are these initiatives that we call WAC, writing across the curriculum, or demonstrating and playing up how interdisciplinary we are, how these other disciplines cannot exist and do what they do or produce what they produce without these sort of fundamental tenets of what it is that we do. And so what I've seen with some of the funding organizations that I get to work with, folks get really excited about applications that demonstrate this sort of interdisciplinary existence between the arts and all of these other fields. And it isn't sort of this steam where, science is taking over and we're just there to draw the pictures. It's more so that we are integral to one another's existences. And so whereas they are functioning with all of this data, we contribute to that. That data cannot exist without the humanities. And so the applications that play that up are really very exciting. Dwanglan, I think when I visit your museum, I'm always struck by this being sociological and anthropological, as well as artistic, and as well as literary. And students get the most excited about our courses and curriculum when they can draw these connections, when they can talk about what they're interested in conjunction to what they're forced to kind of take to fulfill institutional requirements. And so the applications that we're seeing right now within our State Humanities Council and a couple of other organizations that possess some resources to help the art community are those that are unequivocally interdisciplinary. And it's not that folks are recreating their missions or rewriting what they set out to do initially. They're just kind of shining a light on what's always been there and how it can impact community. And I think that also responds to, we talked about technology being marginalizing. Some folks feel that the arts can be marginalizing and it only makes sense to a certain population of folks. And we know that that's not the case. There are folks that are curating their experiences in every community and every hood all over the world. And so really playing up how this should matter to you because this is what you're already doing and this is what already exists in your space. Those are the applications that I'm seeing rise to the top. And it makes sense coming from my academic background because that's how we've stayed alive as English departments, not only as a service department to the campus, which I hate that terminology, but we're an integral part to what you're producing. And we need one another in order to respond to the human existence and experience.
Yeah, Ebony, that really resonates with a lot of the work that we're doing at the Ocean City Film Festival. And I think what we're seeing is that a lot of our impact, just, you know, outside of my Facebook numbers example, is being tracked by the fact that we're documentarians of place right now. That Ocean City, Maryland is going to be underwater in 50 years, and that our filmmakers are going out there on the so-called front lines to really document a place that might not be there, and that intersection, that dialogue that's created is a really special and unique one. And you don't have to be a so-called intellectual or a so-called artist, which are not nasty terms, but of course some people view it that way. You don't have to be an intellectual or an artist to feel that, to understand that, and to understand the struggle that's really present right now, especially in regards to environmental justice, racial justice, and social justice. And a lot of our programming is about the environment and about racial justice. And that's, I mean, just moving to that place has come out of the films that we have received from our artists. And yeah, I should mention that the film that got over 600 people in attendance in 2 days was a film that was about the only biodiverse forest in the Eastern Shore area. And that's just something that a lot of people in Ocean City, Maryland, like 600 people, would not gather to see if we just didn't present it.
Y'all, I hate to cut off this conversation, but I want to be respectful to people's time. It's 2. Thank you for being here. We hope this is the beginning, not the end.